Hello, all you gorgeous drywallers out there, and welcome to a personable episode of the Drywall Podcast. I'm your host, once again, Nick Harmon. With us today, we have a revisit, a man that needs no introduction, and a true pioneer in the influencer space, Brad Hanna. I've known Brad for almost 2 years now, and I recently got to reconnect with him at the CSR's Black Friday event in Vaughan, Ontario, and we decided that we better make another interview. If you haven't heard our first interview, it was way back in February of 2022 at CSR's soft opening at their Barrie location, and unfortunately, it only lasted 19 minutes, although I will say it's golden. In this interview, we talk about the early days of online marketing in drywall and how marketing has evolved, which leads to a discussion about the slop box versus the auto taper and how drywallers can be maybe a little resistant to change.
And one of them, who isn't really involved in it anymore. He was a beauty, though. It was like a backhanded threat. I don't know, but I really appreciate it. What he said to me was, he's like, Brad, what you're doing could be considered defamation, and that can potentially impact my business.
Who is this?
And so I don't really want to have to send a cease and desist or anything like that. I think you're a good guy, but you can kind of get sued by doing this. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, bullshit. But long story short, I looked into it, and he was right.
We also talk about Drywall Shorty's success on social media and a lot about social media in general. And of course, a little bit about Fresco Harmony, all on this, the 118th episode of the Drywall Podcast. This episode of the Drywall Podcast is brought to you by our friends over at CSR. CSR happens to be the premier retailer of drywall products and supplies throughout Canada and beyond. They have two locations, one in Barrie and one in Vaughan, Ontario. Not to mention, their website has just about everything you could ever dream of pertaining to drywall and equipment and cutting-edge tools, while also being super easy to navigate. I know because I've bought stuff there. You can also find Fresco Harmony products at CSR. CSR was gracious enough to sponsor the Drywall Podcast, and they get a lot of good PR from that. If you're interested in sponsoring the Drywall Podcast and joining the ranks of awesome companies like CSR, Columbia, Can-Am, Tech Dry, Rocket City Drywall, and many more, well, I'd love to work with you. And not only that, I will put together a smoking ad like this one for your customers, but your ad will also live in infamy on platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. It's a pretty cool deal. We'll also interview an interesting member of your team and highlight your business all over social media. But for now, the man, the myth, the legend, Brad Hanna out of Burlington, Ontario, on the 118th episode of the Drywall Podcast. Let's get into it. You were talking about, and also for our listeners, Brad is you started out very influential. It was like the land grab on Instagram. People were getting like 100,000 followers real quickly. You were sort of a part of that land grab where people, it seemed like you could just get followers, but at the same time, and it was happening on Facebook too, people were really mean to each other. Like, I think people have learned like now that like, oh, it does not really pay off to be a dick. Like, it's better to be nice. Like, it seems like an easy concept, but for drywallers, it's like, we're starting out and we know everything and we're really gruff and we're dicks.
Yeah.
And that's the way people were on social media platforms early on. Um,
Yeah.
and we talked about you becoming like this bad boy of
Yeah.
with Columbia and
Yeah.
your because you gave a bad review of the level 5 tools. And so yeah, so we can go back to like sort of the early days of
Sure. Yeah. So when I
Instagram.
started, I totally hear you on the land grab thing. And it was because, a lot of those people were really the only ones doing it. And
Yeah.
so when I came in, was probably like my luck is so bad at times, but probably like the day after that ended, I was like, oh, I should start an Instagram. So I never, the wild thing, and I mean, the thing I always tell people, especially new people, young people, the wild thing about my whole journey was I've never had more than my other account was like 6,000 followers, my original
Okay.
account. So I never had more than that. So I came right at the end, but I would say there wasn't as many people doing it. So you were still able to get good retention, And
Right.
so
Right.
I learned early on that as long as I had a decent amount of people watching those stories, like bottom of the barrel, 250 people with good retention on it, they're interacting or they're liking your content. I knew that it was totally worth my time and I could continue to build up clout and a reputation because that's where all the opportunity came from me. Like I never monetized anything I did directly on social media. Never. So yeah, and then it just started getting out of hand. But my thing was like, I wasn't a good finisher when I started, man. I've been using the tools for like 2 years and nobody asked me how long I was using the tools for. So I didn't tell
Right.
anybody. So
Right.
everybody thought like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. I would like literally pull up the schematic before I made a video, memorize some of the words. In the early days, I had to drink to be on camera. Like, yeah, I was frightened by it. I could not do it. So I would drink like 3 drinks, slam them back, and then I would go to town, and it worked.
Uh, okay.
Like it was satire in the beginning because anyone who knew me would tell you like, oh no, he's like super like cool and in person. He's not very confrontational. But then I think, I've analyzed a lot of different spaces on social media, whether it's a podcast or people have, these characters or whatever you want to call it, this persona. And I think what happens to some people is one of those vibes starts working for you, and then you feel very inclined to kind of pigeonhole yourself in that because it's like, oh shit, this has been working. Like, how am I going to go the other way? So
Yeah, yeah. And you were specifically you got picked up by you said Jillian sort of discovered you. You were one of the early ambassadors for Columbia. That came after Phil.
yeah, that was
You were in that
2019.
early
Yeah,
crew.
yeah, yeah,
How did you
2019.
get hooked up with Columbia?
So I had a partner, and we had like a general contracting business, but I always kind of liked taping. So how I got hooked up with Columbia and even social media was we were doing a big project. We were having dinner one night, and I was sitting with him and a sales rep for like a drywall distributor at the bar, and he's like, they're talking about Instagram, and I don't even know what an Instagram is. Like, I'm just a
Yeah,
guy who works with my tools. I never did Facebook, no MySpace. And they're like,
yeah,
Brad, you should like try Instagram. You'd be really good at it. Just be yourself, kind of deal, right? It will
yeah,
work for you. And I'm like, I got pissed because I'm like we're trying to build a business at this point in time. These guys were 5 years younger than me, and I'm like, well, I've surrounded myself with fucking idiots. These guys
yeah,
are talking about social media. Good work gets more good work. That's what I said to both of them. That's
yeah,
the end of the conversation.
yeah.
And then like a month later, I don't know, we were working nights, retail, like construction projects in the stores. So I think we were doing a Home Depot in the store. We could only work nights. I was bored or whatever, and I just started an Instagram page behind their backs. And then a month passed, and they're like, "Oh, you should do it." And we had taping tools, so I started making content. And I had like probably got up to like honestly probably like 900 followers. And
What
then
was the
Columbia
name?
did
What was the name of that account or business?
My first account was it was Brad Han. What was it?
But what was the business that you were in
I've
with?
never disclosed my business online. It was like a very strategic
It's
move. I've
fine.
never advertised my business online. Very rarely would I tag a
Well,
client. I mean,
I had drywall escort is what we had at the first
yeah,
episode.
no. Man, I want to say, you know what? It was Brad Hanna underscore. That's right. It was Brad Hanna underscore. Because if you go back in like 2019 and you look at like a Columbia Taper Tuesday, that was like my first time I ever got reposted in 2019, probably like September. It was Brad Hanna underscore. I deleted that name on that account, changed the name, deleted all the content, and then I started another account, and Brad Hanna underscore was available again. So it was always the same.
Okay.
That's wild. I forgot about that. You just kind of like I'm like, how the hell did I move the name from one to the other? But again, that was a strategic thing. Like I had already been a sole proprietor. I left a corporate job. I had already been a sole proprietor for about 2 or 3 years. And I had met these guys I ended up partnering up with through working through this lady. She ended up having an HGTV show in Canada. I don't know if it made its way up there. It was called Mandy Inc. Her name's
Okay.
Mandy Ranahan. We all worked for her.
Okay.
And she taught us a lot about marketing yourself, being yourself. You know, she does like speaking engagements and stuff. Probably like one of the most pivotal trades people, and she's a woman that I ever met in my life, where she opened my eyes up to like, don't be a corporate drone, man. Like own it. And she would feed us work, and that's how we got into all these retail spaces. We were doing Apple stores, we were doing the Gap, we were doing Intermix, which is
You
like a
wait, you
high.
and this you had a business partner.
No, at this time I was a sole proprietor, and these other
Okay.
dudes were all sole proprietors too. But she would
Okay.
hire all of us, and we would all collectively do our part on the job,
Okay.
right?
All right.
But she's the one who taught me the importance of that stuff. Like you had mentioned about Teak, and oh, I met her. She's fabulous. Oh, she's so fabulous. But that kind of mentality, like, hey, what can I do to market myself? You know, to get the exposure. As long as I get the exposure, then I know my craft is going to stay the rest. But I have to get it, and she really drove that into it. So those guys were like, you should try it. I tried it. Columbia used to have a follower minimums to be an ambassador. It's like, hey, we like you. You're an ambassador. You had to apply. This is like 2019. And I had like 1,200 followers. And Jill's like, hey, we like your stuff. You should apply. And I'm like, Jill, I only have like 2,500 followers. She's like, you should apply. So I was like, oh, okay. So
Yeah. Duh.
I applied. The rest is history. But that was like
Well, the rest isn't history. I believe from our first interview, you got fired. You got wait. I'm gonna leave a little cliffhanger and get more coffee. Tim Hortons, look at that. Look at that Tim Hortons plug. Put that cup up there again.
See this? The first time I saw this was in Buffalo. This is an American thing that has like come into our culture. I was in Buffalo so long ago, and your sizes were bigger than all our sizes. And I asked for an extra large, and they gave me this cup. And me and my wife just started dying laughing. It was probably like 10 years ago. And then like
Okay.
2 years later, all of our sizes turned into American sizes. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we are the kings of gluttony. I mean, more, bigger, waste.
Hey, there's been many times in my life where I wish I was American. I think that my mentality is more American than it is Canadian. I
Maybe.
admire the fuck out of Americans. Like I love
We're so egotistical. It doesn't even occur to us that there's another country north that's called Canada.
yeah.
We don't know that we
But in
don't
all
understand.
fairness, Canada does like you're our big brother, so we do the exact same thing when it comes to just about every other country that's not part of the Commonwealth. Like, are
Okay.
there places, even in America, that I've never even heard of? You know, like
Yeah.
so that sentiment for some of us, including myself, is reciprocated. You know, other than like
Yeah.
Los Angeles and New York and Boston
I
and
well, here's one thing that has been new for me. You know, I've learned a lot about Canada, having gotten to know CSR and all the community up there. I'll say this, Canada has an amazing, I think we talked a little bit about this vortex of energy that is around Toronto and all of these drywall influencers. Not only are Canadians amazing drywall finishers in the drywall space, but there's a tremendous energy around Toronto with all of these influential people, yourself included, and how that has emanated out into the United States. I feel like the United States doesn't really have an epicenter like you guys have like that
Right, right.
in this space. The other thing is Thanksgiving. So, for if you're listening and you're from the United States, Canadians celebrate Thanksgiving on a different day than Americans. Now, on social media, I realized that the Canadians were acknowledging Thanksgiving and they call it American Thanksgiving. Americans don't even realize that you have a Thanksgiving or that it's on a different day or could give a shit about it. You know,
Yeah,
that's like the ego. That's the egotism.
yeah.
But you have a different Thanksgiving. It comes before ours. Does that have to do with, Columbus invading the land and taking
No, so Canada was settled obviously at a different time
Okay.
than America,
Okay,
right?
right.
So you guys celebrate the pioneers setting up camp basically and making
Right.
friends with the Indians.
Right.
Ours is the exact same thing, only at a like that happened in history at a different time frame than when it happened for you guys. I don't even know
Okay.
what yours was about, to be honest with you. Is that what it is? It's when Columbus came over?
Yeah, it's like, and then there was it's all folklore. It's not real. It's
Yeah.
this sort of
Ours
fake
is
story. And now
basically
now there's like an Indigenous Peoples Day, and there's like
yeah.
a movement toward Thanksgiving's kind of a, you know, mm, you
That's
know,
my
eh,
interpretation of it, though. I'm like probably I was born in '84, so my generation was probably one of the first generations in Canada where part of our public education was heavily had this heavy undertone of multiculturalism. Like I can't remember a time where there was prejudice really growing up in Canada. Obviously, there's always a few bad apples in the bunch, and the high schools and the public schools I went to were predominantly white people. We literally have like two black kids, and they were brother
okay,
and sister. But
sure,
everyone was cool, so I don't even know what ours is really about anymore. That's my interpretation of it.
sure.
My family, my like back, I did the DNA test. Everyone came from the East Coast, so that's kind of my interpret. They landed basically like Newfoundland, Nova Scotia,
Sure.
whatever,
Well,
and they
going
just
back, let's go back to this sort of theme of Brad Hanna being the bad boy of drywall.
So it was honestly, I had
You,
nothing.
you got
Uh,
Columbia. You did something, and you pissed off Columbia, and they fired you.
no, basically, my thing was like I would never show my work, man. Like I disappeared from social for a while after that, and then I started showing my work. But the whole time, I would never show my work. It was everything was just a video of me talking about a tool,
Oh, funny.
whatever, right?
Okay.
And that will spin eventually, especially if there's a heavy undertone of satire. Eventually, people are sick of it. You know how easy it is to trigger people on the internet, and it just starts getting out of hand.
Yeah.
And so I would talk about other competitor tools because I was like Columbia fanboy number one at the time, right? And I said some things that I guess some of the other companies felt threatened by, like, hey, this can impact our business. In fact, some of them phoned me back in those days and be like, you're costing us business right now, right? And one of them, who isn't really involved in it anymore, he was a beauty though. It was like a backhanded threat. I don't know, but I really appreciate it. What he said to me was, he's like, Brad, what you're doing could be considered defamation, and that can potentially impact my business.
Who is this?
And so I
Who is
don't really
this?
want to have to send a cease and desist or anything like that. I think you're a
Yeah.
good guy, but you can kind of get sued by doing this. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, bullshit. But long story short, I looked into it and he was
Yeah.
right. that message got back to them, they felt as though I could make an impact. My shtick was wearing thin. In Colombia, Jillian actually called me one day, and she's like, "Hey, Brad, like, we kind of have to like, either you have to stop." That's exactly how it went. She's like, "You have to stop mentioning other brand names in your videos, or we're going to have to go our separate ways, right?" And I was so core at the time and like committed to like transparency and fuck this corporate shit, like punk rock,
Yeah. Yeah.
like fuck anarchy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I couldn't do it. It felt like selling out. It was like, but that's all I got. My work's not even that good. And so we agreed to disagree, and that was the end of it. Like really. And then, like, I mean, it's like, at first you're like angry about shit like that. Like, oh, I'm not gonna change. Then you're in denial. You're like, these people are fucked, punk rock. And then finally, like a year or whatever later, you like accept it. Like, oh fuck, I blew it. Like that was a really great opportunity. I fucking blew it.
You
But
feel
no,
you feel like you blew it.
no. But like so as soon as that ended, because they were pretty particular about like how this goes down. I don't know. It's obviously changed because I see people like doing stuff with a lot of different tools. But like 5 years ago, they were very particular. Like you cannot promote another SKU that we have in our line. And in all fairness, because I'll tell you, they gave me the first time around. Fuck man, like probably close to 7 G's worth of tools, maybe 8 G's worth of tools.
Okay.
Guy with like 1,200 followers. So they have every right in my mind to say this shit. Like, hey, don't talk about other tools. Like, we're hooking you up, man. You got to be loyal to us for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so as soon as that ended, I just started like other tool companies had already reached out, but I'm like a man of my word. So I would never, play both teams.
So
And so
you didn't go and jump on with a different tool company after that out of respect for Columbia.
I did just
You
after a
did.
short period of time. Like
Okay.
I got hooked up with North Star. But as I've matured, I've started to realize that every single tool company fits for a different finisher, and
You
because
know,
there's so many ways to
I
do it.
I talk to everybody that comes on. Most people that come on, we have a small part of the interview where we talk about what tool do you prefer, and
uh,
I'm not sponsored by anybody here. Shout out to CSR. They are sponsoring the month of November or 4 episodes of the Drywall podcast, and then
yeah.
we have different sponsorships for different months. But I think part of the beauty of the podcast is that I can talk openly with people about what tools they enjoy and why, and the listeners of the Drywall podcast can glean knowledge from an honest overview of like, oh, you like level 5 hand tools or the mixer. Oh, okay, that's interesting. I like the mixer too. I think it's really great. Oh, somebody likes a sheetrock brand mixer, or, the skimming blades. For whatever reason, maybe this company makes a better skimming blade, or you've got the box tools. Well, you've got like all these different box tools. It's very interesting why people choose different tools. And I think it's beneficial to the manufacturers as well to have a knowledge about why people are choosing other tools rather than their own, or why they choose their tools. I think it's all really good information and it's honest.
Elliot was always that way. I spoke to Elliot in the very beginning. That was the guy I started dealing with near the end.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
all
he's
of them,
great.
every single one of them, all the other ones, and I'm sure most of them would admit this, they were gatekeeping their brand. Even if they knew something that another company had, a feature, a design element, the way they machined it, they would
Hmm.
still, some of their titles were so self-righteous. It was like, best taping tools in the world.
Sure.
And my thing with that has always been like, you would have to use every taping tool in the world to know what is the best taping tool in the world. So the best taping tool in the world for you, you literally have to try everything in order to make your own opinion of what's the best.
And as drywallers, we're so quick to poo-poo ideas without trying them. Oh, that brand, that brand sucks because X, Y, and Z. And it's
I'll
like,
tell
well,
you one thing about
have you ever ran that tool?
well, one thing I learned over the years, Nick, because I've spoken to like probably hundreds of finishers at this point, there is a portion of finishers who will dismiss something instantly because they can't afford it anyways, right? So they might want to try that, but they know they can't afford it. And so it's really easy to kind of like trick yourself and be like, oh no, that's not going to work for me. I've had the luxury and I used to, it was really bad.
You're saying like maybe the bazooka is expensive, so I'll just keep running the banjo because I can't afford $1,400 for a new bazooka.
Or the bazooka's expensive. In their mind, I have all these bills. This is like totally unrealistic for me to ever have a bazooka. I'm just going to say I can tape just as fast as a guy with a bazooka
yeah.
with this. And it's going to stroke my ego, and I'm not going to feel inferior to this motherfucker who's pounding out 10,000 board feet a week and making bank.
I think intrinsically they're just scared to take that one step back to learn the bazooka, to take the 4 steps forward on how fast it is. You still have people, I still will talk to people about how the shit box is faster, and the shit box, I've had a couple people on the episode on the Drywall podcast, and we've talked about the shit box, and mostly I'm joking about it, but running out 200 feet of muddy tape is actually pretty quick. Like, you can actually put up more, you still got to wipe it in and it's messy and all of this and that. But, the Gilbert Taping, they run the shit box,
Trouble with the shit box. In fact, the trouble with any process that you'll see influencers or just your average Joe on the Instagram talk about, they're like the people who say you're more likely to get killed by a vending machine than a shark. They skew the parameters of what's going on. Well, if I jump in the ocean with meat strapped to me, I'll probably get eaten by a fucking shark. Mm-hmm. If I stay away from vending machines, the one's not going to follow me. So like all of this is flawed, especially with people who speak about things like the shit box. Okay, so that's great when we're at 9 feet. Now let's go to 13 feet. And I'll pull out my 6-foot bazooka.
Yeah. With the shit box, you got to be on stilts. You can't run that shit from the ground. Yeah, it's a 2-man operation.
Especially when you incorporate other elements like the tomahawk, skimming blade, or whatever the new one is. What's it called?
Stealth? Saber.
The saber.
Yes.
So you can string a 13-foot tape accurately. This is not like, oh yeah, like, some guys say they can work from like 15 feet. Man, your shit is garbage if you're doing that. Okay, like put some scaffold there or something. But I can comfortably work 13 feet, sometimes even 14 feet with a 6-foot taper, and then wipe it with my Columbia. It's a 6-foot Columbia braked handle, and I always use a 10-inch tomahawk. I don't use a 6-inch because 6-inch, a lot of mud splooges. So a 10, and you can't touch that, man. No one can touch that. So when I talk about the most efficient stuff, and I know yourself as well, we're talking in all areas, all disciplines. And people who talk too much on social media, a lot of times they only work in one space, residential, right?
Right. That's true.
Commercial, residential, new construction, custom homes, and tract housing. This is the most efficient thing for all of these things. And I think a lot of times, like, why, I don't know why you would even like dispute a shit box versus an auto taper. Like, there's no fucking competition. You know what I mean? And people who speak on that, unless they can run both, really are talking shit, right? I can do both. And there's no fucking way that solo, because a lot of these slot box guys are a team.
They're a team.
There's no fucking way I'm stringing tape in a custom with a shit box as fast as I am with an auto taper solo. There's no fucking way. And so these people, a lot of times when they speak on things, they can't do it both ways. And so that even goes back to what you're talking about. Like, you don't watch much content. A lot of times it gets very cringy for me because I used to do that. I did that for 3 years. I start getting conscious for the people I'm watching. It makes me feel awkward. I'm like, fuck, I used to do that too. Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Very good.
that's the trouble with a lot of it. But yeah, that's with any automatic taping tool,
Hey,
in my opinion.
it looks like you got an Invisivent behind you there on the ceiling. Is that what that is?
Yeah, that's one. And then that's one there too.
Yeah, they're cool. I just think they're
That
cool.
was one of the Brad Kennedy when he first got the plastic ones in at CSR. I was renovating this space and he
Uh-huh.
gave them. I
And
was
also,
charging people $50 labor for those. It was a line item on my contracts because there was a time period when it was getting out of hand.
yeah, it's
You
weird too.
know.
So somebody won't bat an eye to pay $10,000 for a front door, but it's like, okay, so you got $50 for the Invisivent and $50 to put it in.
Oh,
Who
I've
cares?
literally used that. I've used
For a
that
flush
line.
mount, vent, it's so sleek and so cool. It's like
Yeah,
that's so worth it.
yeah,
Give me a break, man.
yeah,
But
yeah,
that's hey, that's just me. But that's not bad. Like a patch, $50 a patch.
yeah. I started doing that with window returns. And I guarantee you there's still finishers, probably younger guys still, that don't understand that your detail. So you have coffered ceilings, you have window returns. That's
Yeah.
50% of the job. The footage doesn't mean shit at that point in time. But
It
yet our pricing up here a lot of times is predicated on the footage. There's a lot more that goes into it, but your starting point is the footage. And
yeah.
so in
Yep.
the end, when we were running like nonstop, I would start charging people a flat rate for every return. I didn't give a shit how big it was. It could be 20 feet by 10 feet, or it could be 2 feet by 3 feet. And I was charging people $250 a return on top of your footage. And then every area,
So one window would be 250 on that return window. Okay.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
hefty.
We're
But
beating it. We beat it too, right? So this is like craftsmanship. It's square. We're using,
yeah.
right? And
Well,
the vents
it
were,
is trim. People don't consider it trim. You don't have to trim out the window. How much are you going to pay the trim carpenter to trim out that window? That's now
that was my line with people. I did probably two customs, and I was really into baseball at the time, so I was all into like sabermetrics and stuff. And I was like, I can kind of apply this to like piecework, or like all of my contracts were always predicated on like a piecework, kind of structure. And that's what I started figuring out. So I was like, I remember having that epiphany where I knew finished carpenters, and we're doing big customs. At the time those homes were worth like 3 million. Now they're probably worth like 4 or 5 million. And how much does it trim it, or do you charge this guy to trim out the house, dude? 50 G's. And right away I'm like, motherfucker, what do I look like? Oh yeah, just add it on. Like, no, that's not how it fucking works. And so I actually lost most of my clients in those big time customs because
yeah.
of that. Corporate ceilings were the same way. Checkered ceiling,
They were
250
saying,
square.
well, my clients were like, oh, well, we don't want to wait because there's like also I'm not going to finish, I'll pull off for a week until you get these Invisivents in so that I can finish them and then do the fresco and then finish it clean. Wait. I don't think it was the time though. I think it was like I'm charging, dude.
Yeah,
I'm gonna charge for those.
yeah,
Like I can't
yeah.
do it for free. And I had already, in their defense, I had already given them probably over between 12 and 15 California patches, covering up all kinds of outlets, covering up two vents. They remodeled a section because I'm making money doing fresco. So like it's like, okay, Jack, just finish that.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's still like, I threw that in and then I threw this little section in and you throw all these things in. And at the end of the day, it's like you look back on it. And Doug McKenzie and I talk a little bit about this. He's like got the CEO Academy. He's doing like he runs a big
Oh,
commercial
Doug.
outfit.
Yeah, Doug has been around for a while. Doug's a good
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. And so we have a good interview, but we talk about this, how we don't charge enough and then we don't budget right. And of course we're idiot drywallers. So, I think having a course or a guideline from someone in the industry that knows how to do it is a pretty smart angle. Like, I think it's pretty smart of him.
Sure.
But, when you add it up, I was like adding up this one patch. It cost me in just labor and materials like $250. Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, that's a $750 patch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it only took a couple hours. We're on the job, but it still cost me money. I had 4 sticks of corner bead on that thing. You don't like, it's like, yes, it's easy for you and you have to charge for it. That's, I
Or,
probably, I
or,
probably
or,
gave up $1,000 extra on that job,
yeah.
that I should have charged for.
Or you just accept that it's the cost of doing business. And,
Sure,
you
sure.
say yes until you can say no. And that's sort of where I got with it. I just got sick
Hmm.
and tired of um, the way it runs up here. Like, if you're not a yes man and you really stick to your guns on what's right and what's wrong, you're not going to have any work. It's just the way it
Sure.
is. The respect is still not up here. So I have nothing wrong with the business or the industry. Like, I think once you start auto taping, you'll never stop.
Yeah.
I'm trying to slot in with guys up here if they need me for like 3 days or a week or like a house here or there. That's where I'm sort of with my craft in the trade. I've thought about just totally not doing it, and it's one of those things where it's like, well, like time versus reward. It's like the best thing you can do. So I think as long as things are there and guys are out there to work with, I'll always do it. But where I got with it was the front end and the back end stuff. I started to resent so much. And that's why, like a year ago, I just started working basically part time.
Okay.
But the front end and the back end, like I just like to push tools nowadays. Dealing with the
We,
customer, explaining drywall to them,
yeah,
all of
yeah.
that kind of shit, I can't deal with it anymore.
You were pivoting though from we were talking about going over to like North Star after your stint with Columbia. So
Sure.
why and so I imagine you had sort of a stint with North Star. Did you like sort of start exploring other brands after your stint with Columbia because you're like, I'm free to sort of use what I want. Maybe I can start doing reviews on different brands.
Near the end of the Columbia thing, I had that's when I had the biggest following I ever had. I had quite a following in my mind. Like I said, it was like 6,000 people, but retention was really good, engagement was
Right.
good, the numbers were good.
Yeah,
And
I'm
there was this
sure.
guy, one of the only dudes who would like troll me while I
Nice.
was like promoting Columbia and everything.
Yeah.
Very passive aggressive, friendly, but he was always on about North Star. And I was like,
Okay.
yeah, whatever. So when it all, I respected this guy. Well, I still do, I
Uh-huh.
suppose. And when it was all said and done, I was like, oh, like I, I felt bad about how it. I felt like I fucking blew it. I was like, oh man, that was such a great opportunity because as a taper, there's not many of those opportunities, and I just tried the tools, and I specifically remember I bought them. I specifically remember when I first ran a 12-inch North Star, and it just changed everything for me. For me, the way I do it, my whole process and everything, it just happened to be like that missing link that I needed. Yeah, man, I just started down that path. I would troll North Star while I was a Columbia brand ambassador. I remember one time,
Sure.
the North Star logo, it's like an N.
Yeah.
One time I took the N and I flipped it in the story so it was a Z, and I put no at North Star Tools, zero customer service, right? And like I would fuck with Mark. But after I ran the box, and he was like, "Man, stop talking about my tools. Like, you got to stop doing that. Like, just you don't know what you're talking about. Shut the fuck up," kind of deal.
How did you meet Mark?
Well, it was just that I ran the box the first time, like I was saying in the story, and then I remember going home because I was like, "Oh shit, I was wrong the whole time. All these videos I fucking made about this and that, like, yeah, they're
Yeah.
probably great, but at the time they weren't the best in my mind. So that's when I deleted all of my content. Like every
Ah.
review video I ever made, anything I ever did when I was an ambassador got dumped, and
How
I
long did
started.
that take?
Oh, it was wild back then. Instagram would like limit. how many people you could unfollow and how much shit you could dump at a time. It took probably like a solid week to get rid of everything. There was no archive back then. There was none of that shit other than in
Okay.
store.
Companies, I guess, fast forward, you shifted your approach, I would think. After that, maybe you became more cautious, more open. Because that would be a big eye opener, just the idea of like, oh, I had this idea of this thing, these tools, and then I tried them, and now I think differently. So much so that you went and deleted all of your content. So that tells me like that you had a shift in perception. You're like, okay, from now on, I'm not going to poo-poo anybody's idea until I've tried it, or at least, you know,
Yeah.
and give honest feedback.
Yeah, I would always pepper it in, I suppose, but not as like it wasn't the whole thing. Yeah, I definitely had that like shift in. I was like, oh man, all this stuff I said was basically fake news. It was misinformation. So I shouldn't really try and carry this thing on. So I deleted everything
Okay.
and then started another account, which is this account.
Okay.
Um, and
And real quick for our listeners, it would be Brad Hanna underscore on Instagram.
yeah, if I haven't disabled it,
And in
that's
case we
like
get some, listeners that don't know who Brad Hanna is, and you want to maybe go follow and check out what kind of stuff are you posting now on your page? And is it just Instagram? Do you do TikTok or Facebook or anything?
no. I was like I stopped evolving after I just stuck my meat and potatoes as stories, and my
Okay.
account's private, and so no, I had posted some things this year, but my last post was like I think it's like January of the beginning of this year,
Okay.
which was like my last big job because I just try and stick to stories. I like to pop in every once in a while, but I take really extended breaks from social nowadays. I use
Okay.
social for the friendships and the camaraderie and a little bit
Yes.
of networking with a few people. It really is a cliche, but I do keep it around for that reason.
Yeah.
Um, I'm
It's
not taping full time. I don't feel like I'm in a position to talk on the tools. And to be honest with you, I don't really have the same passion for that whole thing that I once had.
yeah.
But I've learned from so many different people, all of these guys in the tool industry, like your Wolfgangs, your Aarons, your Elliots, your Marks, all these guys, Brad Kennedy. And I've been able to apply a lot of these things, these opportunities where I was learning these skills to things I actually like doing. You know what I mean? So if I do a job, I've done a lot of jobs in the last, like, I shouldn't say a lot, but 80% of the work I've done, I haven't even posted in the last like year and a half because I'm not relevant anymore. Like I use stories. It's like my personal soapbox. You know what I mean? Like I'll
Yeah.
be sitting at home in my study and I'll like think of something. I'm like, oh, this would make a great story. I'm sure there's like three people who would be
Well,
interested in this, you
we
know?
haven't got into the God conversation quite as much as I wanted to.
Yeah, right,
You
right.
do a lot. No, you post a lot. And when you say soapbox, it makes me think of like you'll post a lot of like inspirational, or maybe there's something from scripture that speaks to you that you will
Yeah.
talk to. You've been open about that. Not everybody's open about religion or politics. You've been kind of open about religion. And for whatever reason, in my sphere, it's been coming around. People like, Big Dog and I had an interview and we talked a lot about religion.
So, and basically what happened to me was I was at a place where I was like really content with everything except for like my soul, man. Like I felt dead inside. I had all these things, but it was like the damage it had done to me and all these other things. And so, yeah, I was just like reaching out and to other things. And long story short, I found God.
Mhm.
And it became something for me where you'll never know everything about it. And anyone who claims
Yeah.
to doesn't know
How,
enough yet.
why God and how? Did you have friends that were like, dude, you should check this out?
Wolfgang, you know
Or,
Wolfgang, yeah, you know Wolfgang. He
oh,
had always
yeah.
been like in my ear about it. and I would like fuck with them. It was like actually kind of, it would like guilty pleasure of mine to fuck with
Yeah.
religious
Yeah.
people,
He's
you
doing it
know?
with me right now. He keeps like sending me shit. And I'm like, dude, get out of here with the fucking God shit, you know?
I had to get to a point where I had to get to a point where I felt like I'll try anything. You know what I mean? Like I was in
Yeah.
therapy at the time and just things were not working for me.
Okay. All right.
The thing about it, I don't like to like preach about it, you know, because
Sure.
everybody's experience with it is different. And I'm a really laid back
I'm
version.
asking. I'm asking.
Yeah.
So there's no shame, man. I mean, and that's why I preface it with like you can talk
Like there's
about it or
I have a
not talk
million
about it.
ways.
It's
I have a million ways.
interesting.
I have a million ways to sell it or to articulate it. You know,
Sure.
it's different things. People absorb different things differently.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just one of those things where, like, whether you were into like punk rock as a kid or whoever your idols were as a kid, and like whoever you looked up to as a kid, they were essentially kind of your god, right? Like you're kind of mimicking them. You kind of have the same kind of attitude as them. And
Yeah.
I think my brain just matured to a point where I was like, I had to finally accept everything I had done wrong in my life and people, you know, situations that I could have acted differently because I was a very aggressive guy. And I got to that point where I was losing all of these like meaningful relationships and friendships. And it's the same story as a lot of people, but they go to God when they're in a tight situation. In my mind, it was like,
Mm-hmm.
Wolfgang's been like chirping this in my ear for so long. I respect him. I have
Mm-hmm.
nothing to lose. I know a thing or two about Jesus. He was good. It was always about good. I've had enough of all this negative satire, you know, just not kindness, just very self-righteous scene. I've had enough. I want to be good now.
Okay.
And just from what he had told me, I kind of put two and two together that like Christianity at its core is about trying to be good
Sure.
to other people. Like that's it. That's the bottom line. You know what I mean?
Well, and I mean, you could almost take it a step further and say all religions at their core is
I
like,
don't know enough to speak about the other ones. The only
sure,
one
sure.
that I don't know about is Christianity. So I started seeking, and which is when you're like more curious about God.
Did you
I've
like
always
choose a church? You like all of a sudden like I'm gonna go check out a church or something?
No, I was still very anti-establishment at the time, and I'm
Okay.
still a big proponent of like, don't tell me how to live. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're not God. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, that's your interpretation of what you read and through your study. And I don't give a fuck if you went to a religious school or university. You're
Yeah.
not God. So at the end of the day, I'm going to use my own intuition. Later
Okay.
on, I started going to church, and what I realized about church is it's like going to a concert with a bunch of like-minded people who all have the same vibe as you. And I go to an evangelist church, and we sing half the time.
Okay.
But it's like going to a club. It's like the Boy Scouts. Like if you ever went to the Boy Scouts, it's like everyone's just vibing and singing. You get
Yeah.
that out. There's a guy up there who's giving you his interpretation of something he read in the Bible. I take it the parts I like. I leave the parts I don't like. It's like
Yeah.
going to see a religious Tony Roberts every Sunday, and I don't do that. Like I haven't been to church in over 2 months. You know, just to predicate all that. But when I go, it's
Yeah.
for those reasons.
Okay. And you feel good afterwards.
Yeah, and if people can't wrap their head around that, forget all of the other shit. Like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
concentrate on I'm looking at everything in a positive light. You know, that's what I
Yeah.
started doing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else to talk about. It's all it is. It's like stop being a negative fucker. Like be positive about it. Let's put a
Yeah.
positive spin. Don't play the victim. Forgive people. You know, like reconcile. Own up. Be a fucking man. Own up when you blow it. You
Yeah.
know, if someone needs an apology, give them an apology. Don't get physical with people. Don't get vindictive. All of these things that I would do in certain situations, when I started studying the doctrine, it all kind of went away. You know, because
Okay.
I've always believed in karma. And that's what they preach, you know? It's very simple moral law. If you're a piece of shit and self-centered, eventually that's going to catch up with you. It's like pack mentality. If you're good and you try and be good and people see you trying to be good and you do good things will happen to you. It was just so basic to me after I had
Yeah.
sifted through the things that I couldn't relate to. where I hung on to those things and it changed my life. Like I've dealt with tragedy since then. I've dealt with loss. I've dealt with some of my plans not coming to fruition, but with this mentality, I have never gotten depressed since then. I don't really play the victim. I mean, it's natural to have that instinct for maybe like 45 minutes. I've never gotten to the places with my mental health or anything like that, being discouraged about something, being like, why the fuck is this happening to me about something? I've never gone to that place since I surrendered.
Okay.
And that's essentially why I hang on to it. And I'm probably but I mean, you're not supposed to say that, but like, I'm not like a poster child for fucking Christianity by any means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know? So to break all of this down in the simplest form, if I have to digest this to an atheist where you're just not getting through to them or they want to argue, which I don't really do. Whatever you believe.
Yeah.
Right? It's like Santa Claus. Okay. And I'm not saying it's Santa Claus, but the dynamic that happens in our brain is the exact same thing that happens to children with Santa Claus. They believe in something with no proof.
Yeah.
But they have these little miracles every Christmas morning that happens. And that's the psychological effect that has on children, believing in something good. If I'm good things are going to happen for lots of Christmas. It works, right? So the way I always boil it down to. And then remember when you found out Santa Claus wasn't real? That was so fucking depressing. You're like, fuck it, I'm just going to be bad now. You know what I mean? Right? Like, fuck, the presents are coming anyways. Don't fucking bullshit me.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing that this turns into for grown-ups for me. Mm-hmm. When you're good things happen. So when I came to God and I stopped all those destructive traits, opportunities were coming at me left, right, and center, or just people, like not having to deal with that bullshit, just being around kind people. You start attracting these very kind people.
Yeah.
I felt I just liked that vibe, man. Like I don't want to argue with people. I don't want to have a dick measuring contest with anyone.
Yeah.
You know, if we want to talk about drywall, you want to talk about anything like that, something that I'm willing to argue with someone, show me your fucking work. Not just one project, show me 20, because anyone can make a golf shot. Show me 20, I will show you 20 of mine, and then we'll decide what the fuck we're talking about. And I would find myself a lot of times being like, oh, you want me to try this new tool or this new technique? Why would I want my work to look shittier than it already does? Look at your fucking work.
I want to talk indefinitely about, some people, some people are going to be like, oh, they're talking about fucking God, like, fuck this and shut it off. I'm trying to have, the content has to be good. Our tool talk is really good. Our social media talk is really good. And even spirituality is good.
Podcast is more like, it's like an industry podcast, whereas other platforms, they're more for more of a particular crowd, right? That's why I respect your podcast.
Yeah.
I remember when you first started, because I was still like pretty active online. And I remember when you first started the Drywall Podcast Instagram page, you had started the page.
Oh, funny.
I was a close watcher and you didn't do anything with it for a period of time. You would like tease things here and there.
Uh-huh.
I think I followed you.
I had to get the content. Like there was no content.
I thought you lived in Toronto. Like I thought you were a dude from Toronto, and I thought you were like at that time, like 5 years younger than me, like early 30s, like late 20s. And then your thing came on, and I was still I hadn't found God at that point in time, obviously, but I was still very like guilty until proven innocent.
We had Joe Koenig on. He was, and I need to get him back on too, because that's a great episode. I think it was number 3 or something. It was very early. And Drywall Shorty, and then Bill Gagne from Canada started the Flat Butts podcast, and I interviewed him.
Bill,
and he only did a couple episodes.
Yeah, Bill's up in Guelph. Yeah. Well,
you know that guy, and he does like a garage. He does a garage show on YouTube that's really popular.
Oh, does he?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, he's my big competition. And then I was like, jokingly, he had it was edited really great. That I listened to a couple episodes. It was really great. A podcast, people think that they're just going to do a podcast. It's a lot work. I mean,
Anything on social, a fucking
it's
story
insane.
chain on Instagram. I
I
can only
know. It's
imagine.
like, you know,
I can
and but
only imagine.
the content's really powerful. So when I started out, I was naive, like, oh, I'm going to do a podcast. But like, you got to find the people to interview. You have to wrangle the people to interview. Like drywallers are tough to wrangle. A lot of them they get nervous, you know,
Yeah,
so they don't want to do it. You've done a couple now, so you're more comfortable. You know, and we scheduled a time. You showed up. Are able to do a podcast. That's a lot. Just doing
yeah,
that. And then
yeah,
beyond that, it's like the editing, and then you have all the content that you're putting out constantly. It's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding, and it's very time consuming and hard. And that's why I'm going to a every other week. I've been doing every
yeah,
week, like pretty consistently, and that's hard. It's just
yeah,
it's like so
yeah.
much.
Yeah, once you kind of figure out the opportunity, like cap, then you just dial it to fit within that. There's a cap for
Mhm.
everybody, Even
Yeah.
social media people, newer people who think that the fucking train's not going to end. For one person, the train won't end. From my group of people, 2019, there's only one person where the train didn't fucking end. And you got to gauge it back and know your audience. And that's sort of what I, essentially ended up doing.
19.
I
Who's
put my
that? Who's that? Is that Phil?
Lydia.
Lydia.
Lydia's number one, man. No one can fucking touch what she's accomplished on social
Yeah.
media.
She keeps going up.
You can't
Yeah.
touch her. She's the voice for me. And I don't do other social platforms. I don't like whatever. Like Instagram is to me for drywallers, anyways. Like it's a very fantastic platform.
Mhm.
You can't touch what she's done, man, or her reach, or her influence, or any what.
Yeah.
Like,
And if you don't know, if you're listening out there, that is Drywall Shorty. Lydia Crowder. Crowder.
yeah. And the fact that she's a woman just makes it way more
Yeah.
accessible for everybody else.
Well,
Like,
and also too, let me preface too that I've met Lydia Drywall Shorty. We just hung out with her. She's
yeah,
so sweet. Like one of the, like at first, she's one of those people. Stop me if I'm wrong. She's one of those people where it's like, dude, fuck her. Why does she have all these likes? Blah blah blah. She's not doing nothing. Blah, blah. You want to be You want to be mean because she's like so successful, you know. And it's like this weird intrinsic thing. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's you. I've gotten better at it, but it's like this instant resentment of like. God damn it, dude. I'm doing color joint compound. I'm making a product. I'm doing all this fucking shit. And
yeah.
all she has to do is post a picture, spot and screws, and like she gets 4,000 likes, and those are genuine likes, man. her
Oh,
re-
she's
her
legit.
her reach
Yeah,
is broad, like, and
yeah,
powerful.
she's fucking legit,
um
man.
but then you meet her in person, you're like, "Ah, she's so nice, like she's such a like ray of sunshine. Why wouldn't I want that for her? Why wouldn't I
Yeah.
want for her to have
And that's
all
why
the
I say one. Like you have all of these people who are doing this stuff, and most of them are not genuine, authentic. They're like on the dick of a brand for personal. Uh, Lydia was genuine. Like what you see is what you get, right? You meet her in person, exact same person. Like, and
Mhm.
that I think that speaks to people. And social for me was always about people have to be able to relate to your content. Number one, you have to be like kind of have your own thing, and number two, your audience has to relate to what you're saying or what you're doing. And she's obviously been able to be like that voice of drywall. And like who else better to have it? There's people out there, but if we're talking about full, what someone has done full circle, it's her. And out of the new batch of people that have come in, there's going to be somebody else that is like will be like alongside
I
Lydia or whatever.
know. I know.
It just
Cam,
goes down the
you know
tiers.
what? Cam was on that trajectory, man. I saw him like just
You and me are down here. Then there's all these other tiers till you get up to there. We're down here,
yeah.
right? It's the elephant in the room that literally nobody talks about. I started doing it in the end. That was a big part of like, yeah, what turned a lot of people off on me is I would audit people's accounts. There was software. I think that they got sued by obviously bigger people who had been debunked. But there used to be a software where you could literally pay this company. It was like $10 an account, and they would run an
Yeah.
audit on that account, and they'd be able to show you when they gained their followers, the day, how many, and they would cross-reference the content they had posted, and they could literally give you a very accurate conclusion on whether or not that person paid, because that is rampant in it, especially in
Oh,
drywall.
right.
Like, I'll tell you something, and
You
I'm not
have a
gonna
you have a chip on your shoulder against people that get fake likes and like bolster their account. But
all of it.
it's strategic though, because sometimes when I look at an account, and it's only because of you that I'm suspect now. But like in the beginning, it was like, oh wow, they've got 100,000 followers. Like they must have really good content. This must be really good. But some of them you watch and you're like, well, I don't understand why they have so much followers.
Well,
I was ignorant to all of that. I just was like, dude, if somebody
yeah,
wants to follow me, they can follow me. And I gave everyone the same love. Like,
yeah.
dude, it's better to have 100 people that really love you and love your content than 100,000 that could give two shits or they're fake.
Right, right. Yeah, it's definitely part of the game. I mean, I when I started to discover all that stuff and everything is really when I stopped having it to be with trying to get like
Mhm.
sponsorships or anything like that. It's when I stopped because I'm not a cheater. I've never been a cheater.
Kind of a
If I
disservice.
cheated, I would be a lot farther ahead in life, but I have a conscience that's pretty pure. Like, I haven't really fucked anybody or deceived anybody. And I'm people used to always say to me, like, your content's so real, man. You're real. Whatever that means. But like, I couldn't live that lie because
Right,
I'm very cognizant of what you're saying. Well, these people only like admire me because my follower count and the fake likes I paid for.
right,
When we strip that away, I'm like everybody else. So I'm essentially living this fucking weird lie where
right.
I've paid robots to like my own shit. I'm being controlled by the Black Mirror right now. It got fucking wild. I
This
was like,
is
no.
this is an interesting conversation because it also goes into the product
Algorithm.
the product manufacturers and how products are being marketed in this space. So now I could give out free product. Oh, you go do a project, you sell it or whatever. That does not help Fresco Harmony. I never paid Cam to make a fucking video about Fresco. He just loved it.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said there. I don't have 20 cams. I don't have 20 Chads like Chad Hesher. He's made
Yeah.
40 grand this year just doing Fresco. One
Yeah.
third of his income has been Fresco Harmony. That's not
Yeah.
fucking nothing. And that's genuine. I don't, he buys product, he uses it. I don't fucking give him free shit. If I'm giving somebody free stuff and they're out there making a silly video and then they never use the product again, well, what fucking good is that?
It looks bad. And
That's
it's
just
what's
my,
happened.
that's me. So people that like the Fresco Harmony page or they follow me or they comment or they post, those are genuine. That's like real shit happening. And I think that, this is, I'll stop my rant, but for products, people will post about your stuff if it's good. There's some new products coming onto the market right now where it's like maybe it's good, maybe it's not. I'll see what happens. I'll see if people start posting and I'll start asking the tough questions like, is this legit? Like, you can, I'll try it, the I mean, I don't want to call anybody out, but the bucket scoop or the bucket it's like a little red thing that goes on the side of your bucket. Like I tried it. I'm not gonna do. I certainly won't do a bad review. Like that's mean.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
more for the tile guys because they don't really use a hawk. But I'm always
Yeah.
like, we clean our shit off and then put the
Yeah.
fucking hawk on top of the bucket. I
Yeah.
don't need a red thing in my goddamn bucket that gets in the way. It's just another
Yeah.
thing. It just seems like that's a really tough one. There was also that ball, that quickset mixing ball.
Oh, I remember that thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. But what
right.
about, remember,
Oh,
there's that.
I remember that thing. And so, like, this is a really tough space to create products in and then market those products and have them fly. You've got these big fat cats that are throwing money at influencers. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
I'll give you a shirt or a hat or like, if you're using the product, I can certainly send out a free product, but it doesn't even
Yeah.
behoove me to send out free product. You know,
Yeah.
if it's gonna sit there,
Yeah.
like,
The thing
you
about
know,
there's a I'm a like a researcher guy. I like to figure out how things work before I like commit myself to it.
yeah,
And a lot of this stuff that they give out, they can write it off on their taxes. It's a marketing expense. So as much as we'd like to sit here and think, oh, this is so nice and you're being so genuine, they're getting it back on the back end because they pay so much money in tax every year that's otherwise going to go to somewhere else. And there's literally in Canada, anyways.
here's one: troll clothing. Okay, like motherfuckers, they're making shirts and hats. Like, okay, they got a cool brand. Like, I get it. But how much does it cost troll clothing to give somebody a free hat and shirt? And like the motherfuckers will go out and just advertise the shit out of that fucking brand
Well,
for
they know
for
how to play
four
on.
$5 worth of fucking swag.
It's
Like,
shifted into like the space started shifting in 2019 when I got on into what they call micro influencers. So rather than have one person with 50,000 follows, one opinion, let's get 10 people who all have 5,000 followers with 10 different opinions. And eventually the sabermetric and the numbers of that, we're going to hit on some of those posts.
it's smart.
So these nine dumbasses aren't going to do fuck all for us, but this one gem in the bunch is going to do it. So it just became like, what it was. And what's happened though to me, what I see, because I see through most of the bullshit, is remember when we were growing up, if you stayed up till like 11 o'clock at night, there's always those cheesy infomercials.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've done full circle now. Those were just actors who were being paid to say some cheesy ass shit. These people who are like, whether you're an electrician, a carpenter, or a fucking drywaller, you're not a marketer. Some of us can be that. There's some people, yourself, who can do that, but most of them aren't. So their content just becomes very cheesy and stale over time. It's like, whoa, today, like if it's not authentic, like I
Mm-hmm.
tried this thing and man, it has changed the way I drywall finish. Let me just explain this 4 inch, like it's fucking wild. I'm like, dude, when you're at home, you don't talk that way. So fuck off. Like I can't deal with it. People
Yeah.
want authenticity. Furthermore, to your point, that's why with your small cult following you have right now, where it's still when you want to talk about drywall, your product is in its infancy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk about drywall companies or manufacturers, and you've made a huge impact with a small amount of people in a short amount of time by doing what you've done. You have proven to everybody, along with myself and some of us else, you don't need to live a lie. You don't need to fucking have that hanging over your
Right.
head. You don't need to play the
Right.
game of they're going to like me because they see more followers. But as soon
Yeah.
as they figure out I only get 30 likes a post or
Yeah.
50 likes a post on like
Uh,
50K or even 10K, I'm a fucking fraud and a phony.
yeah,
You just
more
said
people are paying attention. And like I'm doing jobs. Like I'm starting a job Monday. Like fucking, $8,000 worth of fresco. It's like I'm not lying. I've been doing this shit for 20 years. Like um, I like the tail end of this conversation. I've liked the whole conversation. It's pretty good. We've had sort of three parts. We talked about social media, and then and then you segued away, and then we talked about
I like this format. This
we
format's
talked
really good where it's just like having a coffee with another drywall guy.
it's yeah, so it's interesting, but more of an interview, like as Sean puts it. My girlfriend calls it a human interest story. Drywallers are interesting character. It's an interesting character of people. But I've interviewed other people. My brother-in-law started American Health magazine. Like
Oh
he
wow.
started in the 70s. He's an older dude. But yeah, it's a fantastic interview. We're outside. But I feel like I'm at the point where we're just shooting the shit now, but like I want to get into um higher profile interviews. I started a pseudo podcast early on called The Local Cast, where I was going to interview influential local entrepreneurs in Albuquerque and dudes that like all over the board. And I've got a few interviews on there, and they're cool, but there's no different format than I use for the drywall podcast. Although, aside from this is drywall specific, this is industry specific, which we needed. The byproduct was just, oh, I'll promote Fresco Harmony.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what's your take? You're still like a holdout, and like religion, I don't try to drive it down anybody's throat. It's like you played with it a little bit, you made a cool heart, like it was
I
cool.
I think that's a big reason why I've never really talked to someone who's like, oh, that Nick guy, fuck that guy. Because you don't do that. You know what I mean? So
I try not to.
Work in your favor, even people who are not even into that. Whereas if you were trying to shove it down everyone's throat, like, oh, this is fucking snake oil, it's going to hurt you more,
Yeah.
But my take on it is, like, in Canada, we have this, like, I want to say 15-year interior design trend cycle. Every 15 years, where I live anyways, in the GTA, every 15 years, the style of interior design completely shifts, Things like plaster and stuff, that seems to roll around every 5 years.
They didn't solve the problem, Brad. Like, I have to interject. Like, and then I hear this all the time. Like, and I can talk like about Fresco till the cows come home. Like, it's my favorite. But plaster didn't solve the problem of those walls that are in your house. That's smooth finish, great, looks beautiful. It's the most boring fucking thing you can do to a wall. Make it perfectly flat. Like, okay, that's great. That is great. How about this? Like, how about for floors, instead of having the 5,000 options that you have for flooring or countertops, we just have one flat fucking white option that you choose. How ridiculous would that be? It's ridiculous to me that there are zero options for walls other than texture and paint or smooth finish and paint. Or if you want to pay $1 million fucking dollars, we can Venetian plaster it. It's like, well, why isn't there just something in the middle that looks neat and is subtle and cool, that's affordable and makes the drywall guy extra money?
Yeah. I think, we are definitely boring and flat up here. It's just kind of the way it is. When I got into the trade, we were spraying popcorn, and that was 15 years ago, and that's done. Like, I can't really see that.
No, I'm not talking about fucking popcorn, dude, or even texture.
Up here, very anti-texture. For some reason, probably because, the HGTV shows, we have like central regionalized HGTV shows. So we probably have a lot of Canadian versions of stuff you guys have never seen. It was always that way. It's always been flat for the last 15 years, and
sure.
I personally like it. I'm a minimalist. I like contemporary things. Yeah. My whole house is white. Yeah. My floor in this room is white oak.
It's clean. And don't get me wrong, it's very pretty. It's it's expansive. It's colder. Fresco Harmony is warmer. And then people also have a misconception that it is textural, and it's not. It's pretty flat. It's not like,
if you don't want it to be, it isn't.
It's not level 5, but it's fucking flat. When you look at it, it's not like skip trowel or orange peel or, it's like flat. It's a paradigm. It's this weird like paradigm shift that I'm in right now, where it's like, no. We figured out a way to do walls with joint compound, and you don't have to paint, and they look really cool.
Yeah. If I were in like full time in the drywall business again, like for quite a few years I did commercial. All I did was commercial. Yeah. And so if I lived in the GTA and I was a guy who was applying Fresco Harmony, I would, whatever, residential things are great and fine. But if you wanted to really create consistency while using that product, you would take your sales pitch to the people in the buildings, anything commercial, where traditionally we would use wallpaper, all condo buildings for the most part, and we're using wallpaper. Commercial facilities, I worked in facilities for 7 years. We would use those up here instead of a flat wall because it's a lot easier to repair. So if I was a Fresco Harmony applicator, I would be hitting up these building operators left, right, and center. It's like
Yeah.
dating a girl. When you send the literature to 10, one of them's going to bite on it, and it's so easy to sell. Because as soon as the people ding up the walls and shit that you traditionally were either wallpapering, which was way more expensive, I would imagine, way harder to find an applicator, I would imagine. Use this product. Your maintenance guy can do the repair. You're always going to have something that
Yeah.
looks presentable. Those are the angles that I'd be set beyond the obvious accent here and accent there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
been
I think there's a
interesting.
market for it there. I
It's
really
been
think there's a
interesting.
huge market.
We've got a big potential adventure coming up. It'd be cool to have you involved with in Pennsylvania, but I'm talking with people. It's huge, 15,000 square feet. I've known the guy. He did fresco on a house on the East Coast, like the whole thing. He's a high-end builder.
Yeah.
And I want to have like the drywall dudes come in, do drywall, the fresco, and then run it as like a training. We'll have like a crew that's on the ground doing Fresco Harmony. And what's your take on these drywall adventures that are happening?
I when I was running my stuff, there's no way I had the foresight to be like, hang on, I'm gonna like make time for this. I just wouldn't have. I was so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
gotta do this, gotta do this. But in retrospect now, seeing you guys doing it, I think it's fabulous. It's like I'll say to anyone, even if you engage in one or two of these like face to face sorts of things, the
yeah,
friendship, the
yeah,
relationships, the opportunities, like your time is always going to be worth it. Like
yeah.
there's no time.
Yes.
It's just making that time. And as I'm sure you can understand, a lot of people are self-conscious. They're shy. It's why social is such a great outlet for them because they can ask questions which they otherwise wouldn't have. But if you can muster up the courage to do something like that, I have Sean, put in the bug in my ear since really you guys started doing the stuff. And I
Yeah.
mean, I was really on the fence about doing things like that, but no, I think it's fabulous. You guys back in the day, it was like everyone met up and had like a drink, from Instagram in the GTA,
Yeah.
even like carpenters with drywallers, and
Are,
that
are you
fizzles away.
still
Now you guys,
are you still like an ambassador for North Star?
no, no, honestly, Nick, I shut
None of
everything
that.
down.
None of that. Okay. It would just be cool to have Brad Hanna on the job, and even like the other cool part is like you get like the Gilbert taping or Danny Moody or you know what I mean,
Yeah,
Durotech,
yeah,
even Lydia. I haven't worked with her yet. That'd be cool.
yeah.
But you get all these like dudes and dudettes on a job and you're not only are you blowing out a house, but you have all these pros. It's a lot of fun. You would be a good addition. It'd be fun, and it's just like you're all talking
People,
shit.
people have been talking about that for as long as I was on, and you guys were like the first ones to like actually do it. And
Yeah,
I guarantee you, just from my own personal experience, like I've been in this space for like a half a decade. I guarantee you there are people watching you guys do that stuff who are being so like positively impacted, where in 4 years' time, maybe they're like early 20s, they'll just carry it on.
yeah,
So I think it's
yeah.
phenomenal. I love it. I have nothing bad to say about it because
Cool.
I I have nothing good to say about the taping when it comes to those sorts of things. I'm a pretty
Yeah,
well of a purist with my
yeah,
stuff. It's just
yeah,
you know,
yeah. Brad Hanna, and you're still in Burlington?
yeah, man, yeah, yeah,
Burlington, GTA, which means Greater Toronto Area.
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
So that's the GTA for all you Americans out there who don't know anything about Canada or care about Canada. We're shifting it here on the Drywall Podcast because we have all these influencers and cool people coming out of Canada and amazing finishers. Thank you so much for being on the Drywall Podcast today. We finally got a solid, adequate interview with Brad Hanna. Um, could we say legend? This is a legend in the industry.
Yeah, legends never die, right?
Legends never die. Oh. pearl of wisdom for the drywall community? Something you could put on a billboard. What would you say?
Like about social or just drywall in general?
Drywall or beyond society?
I would say
Per-
drywall in general. Say
okay.
yes until you can afford to say no,
Okay. I
for
like
sure.
that. I like that. Say yes until you can afford to say no.
And when it comes to social media, it's really simple, you know. Like people are either going to like you or they're not. You can't pay for followers or pay for likes to skew that because it will catch up to you. That's moral law. That's how everything works, you know. You just
Very
have to be
good.
yourself,
Yeah. 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 Be
like you're
your
doing.
be your authentic self. And I wish that it was my idea. I stole it from Gary Vaynerchuk. I listened to a lot of he wrote a book called Crush It, but he's very big on being authentic. And people are nervous to be authentic, or even post. Like, I'm not gonna post the right thing. Just fucking throw it out there. Nobody gives a shit.
No.
Post it up.
And it becomes like it's like riding a bike or a skateboard. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. It's
Yep.
really weird. And sometimes I'll go a long period of time without doing a story post, like 3 weeks, and then I'll throw it out there. And I always read my stuff back. I find my own shit very entertaining, to be honest with you. So
Yeah,
I'll
me
like
too.
watch it
Me
back.
too.
I watch it back. I want to make sure everything I'm saying is accurate. And
Yeah.
um, and a lot of times when I'm like very self conscious about something, I'll always get every fucking time one, two, or three people being like, "Hey, man, I really needed to hear that today. Thank you so much."
That's the
And you
stuff.
know,
Yeah, exactly. It's like, should I post that? And it's always when I'm really raw. I did a tribute podcast for Cam that was very difficult, but I sort of laid it out what happened, the whole story of that adventure, and um, it just something I needed to do, and I'm glad that I did. It's there. It's there for people to listen to. It's in the archives, and the podcast in general. Like I didn't. People thought I was like dumb, like a like my normal friends are like a drywall podcast. Are you out of your mind? What? Who's gonna?
your normal friends.
My what my and
No,
like
it's accurate.
I was going through a separation with my wife when we did our interview, and I was going through a separation then. I had
Oh wow,
separated. It was hard. It was a hard time for me. That
yeah.
particular time in my life was really difficult, and I hit it, and I did the thing, and I was early in the podcast, but I met my girlfriend. We had known each other prior, and always been good friends, and uh, I told her like, oh, I do. She listens to podcasts, and I was like, oh, I do like this drywall podcast, and she's like, oh, fucking snoozer, man. I'll put that on when I'm going to bed, and
Yeah,
she listens to every episode. She loves it. It's like you never know until you put it out there. Say yes until you can't.
drywall and the personalities in it work. I'll tell you my kind of
Hmm.
parallel to that. I've never played Magic cards. I don't give a fuck about Magic cards. I don't collect Magic cards. But I
Okay.
watch these videos about dudes who do collect Magic cards and they open the packs and they talk about the market value and like,
That
oh,
is
this is
that
what the
like is
code.
that Pokemon? It's
No,
not
this is
Poke.
like Magic. It's like that, right?
It's
But I
like
have
it.
no interest in it. But these
Okay.
personalities and the
Yeah.
way that that thing works is so interesting to me. And I think
Hmm.
it's just a matter of time with drywall. Because if you know enough about the history of the tool manufacturers alone and
Yeah.
everything, you could have a Netflix special, remove the word drywall with cocaine, and everybody would fucking love it. Same personality, same everything.
Yeah.
Everyone would
Yeah.
love it because it's so dynamic and interesting, you
Yeah.
know?
It's true. It's true. Well, cool, man. We could talk for forever. You are great to talk to. I'm glad that we got this like huge amount of time. I'm gonna have to sift through
Yeah.
this and really do some quality editing, but like
Cool,
keep it.
man.
Got to keep in all the gold. Maybe we'll cut
Yeah.
out some of the religious stuff. Keep a lot of
100%.
not all of
Cut
it,
it
not
all
all.
out. It's
We'll keep a little
fine.
in
Just
there.
hit your point. It's like
Wolfgang,
that's the trick to a story.
no way.
People don't know the secret sauce to a story. you have every piece in your story chain. There has to be
Uh-huh.
a punchline or value. And that's how
Yeah.
comedians write their sets or a
Ah,
video game writes its set. And so
sure.
anytime I've done stories, there's got to be a punchline. And that sounds like the way you're editing the podcast. Like
Mm,
long dialogue, you will fucking lose a lot of people,
yeah,
especially
yeah.
religion. Honestly, Nick, take out the religious stuff. Like, I'm
Uh.
glad you and I had that conversation. No, honestly. I'm
No, it's good.
I feel that like that's what my whole thing has become. Like there's legendary stories of me breaking tools with other tools, but all that content's gone. So all it is a legend.
Yeah.
My thing now is just like I look at it like a Tumblr page, where it's just like a profile of my work.
Hmm.
Or I like to think of it, if someone ever name drops me, someone has that's why these guys like this guy because he's good at his thing. But the most important part is inspiration, So I'll send
Yeah.
you a bunch of stuff of my work. That's all I really got now is like my quality of work. Like I'm not doing it all the time. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
cool, man.
Beautiful. Brad
Awesome.
Hanna,
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it.
thank you, sir. Have a good rest of your day. We'll talk soon.
You too, brother.
Special thanks to Brad Hanna for being with us on the Drywall Podcast today. I really appreciate your candidness and just being honest and open with us about your experience. I appreciate you and what you bring to this community. Have a hankering to tell your story on the Drywall Podcast. Not only would I love to hear it, but I'm sure our audience members would love to hear it as well. You can reach out to me at 5054-100-9313 and talk to me directly, or shoot me an email at info@frescoharmony.com. Huge shout out to CSR for sponsoring the Drywall Podcast for the last 4 episodes. I appreciate you guys, all you do for the Drywall Podcast, the swag buckets, and also carrying Fresco Harmony and supporting Fresco Harmony. That is the type of company CSR is, and we are proud to call them our friends and allies. Thank you so much for joining us on the Drywall Podcast today. I hope you had as much fun as I did, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend. And also, since we're heading into Christmas and the holiday seasons, I hope you have a fantastic holidays. Doing whatever you're doing, be safe, have fun, spread love, spread joy, and above all else, keep drywalling.